So in this lesson, what we're going to talk about are filters, smart objects, and adjustment layers. I know we've touched on adjustment layers a little bit, but we're going to go in a little bit more detail about them and how to apply them in a non-destructive manner. The real talk about today is non-destructive versus destructive editing. Destructive editing is when we destroy pixels, we save things, and we can't come back and fix them later. Constructive editing is when we always have our original file. We talked about this as early as our first crash course, so this isn't anything new to you, but we're going to go into it in a little bit more of a detailed way so you can see it. So in today's Canvas assignment, you will see right here, Smart Objects and Filters. I'll need you to click on that, download it, and open it into Photoshop, please. Alright, so this is the file, and just like any time that you're working with anything in my Photoshop, you need to check the layers first. So let's go over to the layers and double check what that looks like. So first you'll see worksheet, and that'll be locked. That'll be your base layers with just the text and different things on it. And then you'll have two images. They're the same picture. One's just dressed up as a smart object, and one is a raster or bitmap graphic. So now on the raster and bitmap, that's where I want you to have clicked for the moment. Raster and bitmap basically mean that everything is made up of these squares. So if you hear bitmap or raster or pixelated, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about these little squares that make up every single image that you'll see in Photoshop. There are graphics that are not built this way, and we'll go into those when we start looking in Illustrator. But you'll see if you zoom out of those pixels, you'll see a good rendering of that image. So that's what a raster image is. This is just a raster image. Now the other one is raster as well, but it's a smart object version of it. So it's the same thing. If I zoom in on this one, you're still going to see pixels. Okay. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is I want you to click on this raster image, and I want you to hit Command T or Edit Free Transform. And I want you to notice that if you shrink this picture down, it's going to shrink down how you want it to. So I want you to shrink it down relatively small and then hit return on your keyboard. You may notice it blur a little bit when you hit return. That's because when you make it smaller, it gets rid of some of the extra pixels that it didn't need to start with. So at this size, it doesn't need all these extra pixels, because if I zoom in, I can see that there aren't that many pixels to share. So that picture's changed dramatically. Now raster images, if I hit Command T and I make this bigger, notice it stays pixelated. It's already lost all those extra pixels. It got rid of them. So when I make it bigger and I hit return, Photoshop is going to attempt to guess and fill in those pixels. But it's going to blur like this every time. So this is a problem. This is not going to do what we want it to. Anytime you have an image and you make it bigger, you're going to pixelate it just like this. And that's true for smart objects too. Everything comes in, then goes bigger, gets pixelated. Now let's try this again, clicking on the smart object layer, and let's do the exact same thing on the smart object. So when I shrink it down and hit return, you'll see that it does the same thing as the other one. But when I make this smart object bigger, it keeps its clarity. Now the reason it does this is because this image is not actually here. This smart object is reading off of another file. And that file is right here in your layers. You can see it in that corner piece. That is the original file, meaning you can always go back to that original file. If I double click on that thumbnail to the left of smart object in my layers, it'll open that original layer. And I don't want you to do this, I just want you to look for a second. If I grab my brush and I paint on top of this like that, and I exit out and save this, watch what happens. It shows up here. But if I double click back on this smart object and I clean that up, then it'll go away. So there's all kinds of different ways of looking at these things, and in fact now that I've saved it, you can see that it's locked in. So you do want to be careful. You can damage pixels even here. So I'm going to not save, and I'm just going to back this up. So there's a lot to be said about smart objects because they keep a backup for you, an off-site backup. And that's what makes them special, is it keeps everything where it needs to be just in case you need it later. Now, if I wanted to hit Command Z here and go all the way back to this, I could hold Control on this raster image and convert it to a smart object. That'll do the same thing as the one below. And you can just watch, you don't need to do this necessarily. But when I shrink that picture down real small now, and then I make it bigger, all of a sudden it looks a lot clearer. So that's not what I want out of you. I want you to have that small image, and then I want you to make it bigger so that it's nice and pixelated. That's what I want to see on yours. Alright, so on the raster image, I want you to click on that. And I want you to go to the top, and I want you to go to Filter. And I want you to notice that you have some different options underneath Filter. They're all set and ready in here. You can find blurs, Gaussian blurs, distorts, all kinds of different things. But you can't get access to the filter gallery, which is what we want. So I'm going to click on that smart object, and this time I'm going to go to Filter. And I'm going to see I still don't have an access for this filter gallery. What's happening here is that certain color modes will lock off certain things. So if I go up to Image, Mode, and change this to RGB instead of CMYK, I'll hit Don't Merge. Make sure you hit Don't Merge. Don't Rasterize. Make sure you hit Don't Rasterize. Just don't and don't. But now when I hit Filter, I all of a sudden have the filter gallery. So I want you to click on that filter gallery. Now originally, when Photoshop first came out, this was one of the things that made it so popular. Because just like Snapchat filters of today or Instagram filters today, how did you take a basic standard picture and make it look different, unique? If you had a different way of doing this, it probably sold. This was what made Photoshop big, is it had all these filters that anybody with no skill at Photoshop at all could just click one time, and then they've got this really cool little artsy version of their image, right? So I want you to click through here, and I want you to find a couple of these. I want you to find one that you like, and I want you to click on it for me, whatever you would like. On the right hand side, you'll notice some adjustments that you can make that create different looks. So try changing some of these options over here and see if it doesn't give you a more unique look to what you're trying to do. Maybe you want something that's a little crazier. This is what's going to give you all of those cool looks. So without playing around with it, you're always going to end up with something that kind of looks corny. I know a lot of kids like to stick on this glow effects or this neon glow. Try some different things, or at least try some different colors, because you can do all kinds of stuff with these. So, tinker, tinker. Once you're happy, hit OK. And you'll see it applies it to your actual lion here. Now the cool thing, to me at least, is that it gives you a smart filter underneath. This allows me to hit that eyeball and delete it. So I can get rid of that effect if I don't like it. It also comes with a white layer mask already attached. Let's try to do the same thing on the raster image. Let's click on that raster image. Let's go to Filter, Filter Gallery. And I know the image is a little blurry, but you can still pick whatever you'd like to make this look different. Hit OK. Now the difference here is on the raster image, I do not have a smart filter. So if I save this and come back tomorrow, that effect is going to stay there. There's nothing I can do about it. It's going to be there. However, the smart object, with the smart filter, I can make an adjustment to it. So that's one plus to that smart object on top of it keeping a backup. Alright, so I want you to look at your smart object. And I want you to look right here at the corner. This is the thumbnail for this. I want you to double click on that one time. Double click. And in your layers, you'll see Smart Object, and you'll now have this basic look. So we're going to make some effects to this image. First, I'm going to go up to the top, and I'm going to hit Filter, and I'm going to go down for Blur, and look for Motion Blur. So click on Motion Blur for me. Now, you can play around with the distance. You can play around the angle so that this looks a little different, however you would like. I kind of want to make her look like she's in motion. And I'm going to hit OK. Now, again, the problem here is that this effect stays, and I don't like that about it. I don't want it to stay. So maybe I need to convert this to a smart object first. I can go up, I believe it's in Edit. I might be lying to you. Oh, it's under Layer. And I can go to Smart Object, Convert to Smart Object. So Layer, Smart Object, Convert to Smart Object. And then let's do that again. Filter, Blur, Motion Blur. Hit OK when you're happy, and you'll see that blur takes place here. I want you to hit the eye on that for the time being. Now let's talk adjustment layers. Adjustment layers are editable adjustments that you can make on anything. So I want to create a couple of different adjustment layers on top of this. So I want to look for this one, the one that says create a new posterize. If you're confused, you can look right here at this half black, half white circle and choose posterize. I'm going to choose my levels. You can pick whatever you would like, whatever you're happy with, between 2 and 4, but I would stick somewhere in there. Let's say 5, between 2 and 5, whatever you're happy with. Right here at the bottom of properties, I'm going to link it down so it only affects that one. Then I'm going to go back to adjustments. I'm going to put hue and saturation, and I'm going to change the color of this to a color that I like. You can pick whatever color you would like, but link it down. Always link down to the layer below. So even though it looks like this hue and saturation is pointing at this posterize, both of these are actually pointing at the smart object. So both of these will only affect the smart object. Once happy, turn the visibility back on that smart filter so you can see that blur. And select this layer right here, this layer mask. Now just like last week, layer masks, even though both of these have layer masks attached, so does the smart filter. We haven't clicked the layer mask button, and I don't want you to. But by having all of these set and ready here, I can make changes to these effects quickly at a motion. So I'm going to get my brush, B for brush. I'm going to make sure black and white are my fore and background color, choosing black as my foreground. And then I'm going to pick a simple brush, my soft round brush. Not that big. You can pick whatever size brush you want, just make it kind of smallish. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on the Motion Blur Smart Filter layer mask. And I'm going to brush just the face so that her face looks clean, her teeth look clean. All the rest of it can stay blurry. I don't really care, but I want her face to look vicious. There we go. And then let's say on the posterize, I click on that layer mask, and I want her face to look a little smoother and a little bit more real. I can take away some of that effect without taking away all the rest of it from the rest of the image. Right? Or the hue and saturation. Let's say there's too much red right here. I can knock that down if I want to. Maybe I want my brush to be bigger. Have like a nice little fading to blue. So I want you to play around with these. This is what makes your images look unique. Now the cool thing about the smart object is if I come up here and I exit out of the smart object and I save it, it'll pop up inside of this completely done. Now it may look a little off, something might be different, but that might be because you have a smart filter here attached to it. So double check your layers. If you can hit that visibility to turn off an effect, then that's constructive editing. That's what I'm looking for. Destructive editing is like this raster image where I have no way of going back to this original. If I can't go back to the original, it's a problem. One way to tell is by holding Shift and clicking on these effects or clicking these eyes. So if I turn those eyes off and I come over here and I turn these eyes off and I exit out and save, I've got my original image back like nothing is on it. If I go back in here and I turn them back on, wrong button, and I save again, it's going to pop up here done. Having your effects in a way that you can turn them off, because at the end of the day, if your client doesn't like it, you have to be able to go back and fix it without going back to square one. That's the goal, okay? Now, filters, adjustment layers, smart objects, these are some of the most complicated things inside of Photoshop to really get an understanding on. But tinkering with them, playing with them, kind of coming up with your own way of doing them is going to make life dramatically easier. Do not forget the layer masks down there at the bottom. Those layer masks will help make everything more interesting. So I like it when you can cut your effects off and on. I like when you can merge your effects in weird ways. Play around with it. Now, if your screen looks like my screen right here, I want you to take a screenshot. There it is. I want you to take a screenshot. Again, that's Shift Command 3 for my Mac users. For my PC users, it's probably Alt Print Screen, but make sure you click the How to Screenshot just to make sure that you've got that correct. Once you've turned this in, you are good for today's lesson. Thank you so much.